Welcome to a guest episode of the NERO Show featuring Hannah Furler, the Product Road Race Bicycle Tyres Manager at Continental International.
We chat through who's actually doing the testing that's dictating the road tyres that we're going to be using over the next 5 to 10 years.
What tyre width does Continental think you should be riding in 2025?
We also got a surprise answer when we asked, what's the future, clincher, tubeless or hookless?
And Hannah shares a few clues as to what the GP6000 might look like. All right, let's get into it.
Hannah, who dictates the path forward for tyres, whether it be width, whether it be the features of the tyre? Is it, for example, Continental saying, we think this is the optimal width race tyre, and then the wheel and the frame manufacturers follow? Or are you guys listening to what's in the market and then responding to that? How does that?
I would say it's a combination of both. So, of course, every new development, and especially if you're talking about tyre widths, it's triggered by the bike manufacturers. So as you've probably heard or already discussed with the 40 mil road tyre that doesn't fit any bikes, that will be kind of something that we usually don't see, because when we start a project for a tyre development, we of course also want to sell the tyre ultimately. So if we're developing a size that doesn't fit any bikes, then that would be just kind of weird or pointless, actually.
Yeah.
So that's like, in terms of width, you always want a product that fits, or a bike that fits your product. If you're talking about performance characteristics like rolling resistance, puncture protection, weight, and all of that, then that's partially triggered by what our competition is doing. But of course, if you're at a certain point, like rolling resistance, and then you're coming out with a new product, you can either just stay at the same level, or of course you're trying to, especially for road or race tires, you're trying to increase the level.
I find that interesting because, I mean, I would have thought that like Continental has data on what they think the consumer or a pro rider should be using in different scenarios.
Because if you bring up the topic of pro teams, like they have a certain bike for a season that has a certain tire clearance. And within that tire clearance, we of course also get like requests saying, oh, I don't know, for Roubaix, why don't you have a tire in this width? Or actually we're trying to, like, because it doesn't, like, tire development takes some time. So it's not like, I don't know, our team gets a bike in November, or it's announced in November, and we're like, oh, in February or March for Roubaix, we have a tire that fits it. So of course we have discussions with the teams and with the bike manufacturers prior to that to then have product to fit the bikes.
What's the sort of timeline on that? The reality is that, you know, new bikes will be coming out with wider and wider tire clearance. So would Continental be looking forward and saying, okay, well, we've seen the next Specialized bike that has 38.
And Specialized is now doing an OE spec from Conti Tyres. That would be great.
Yes.
Specialized is listening to that. Yeah. Reach out to the sales team.
they've packed their tires in and they've just gone, no, we're running Contis now. Yeah. How far ahead would you be looking?
This also depends on the development cycle of the bike manufacturers. So currently, we would be talking with bike manufacturers about like model year 27-ish. And of course, if there's a big leap in, well, I would just call it innovation, but let's say like tire widths.
Yep.
So of course, it's also in their interest to have theirs, or actually just like the initial OE tire that they're fitting on their bike in a size that they want. So if a bike manufacturer is now thinking about coming out with a, I don't know, 50 mil tire width road bike, then they would need to talk to the tire manufacturers and say, hey, we're thinking about producing this bike because we think that there's a market for it, there's a consumer for it, but we also need a tire for it. Mm-hmm. And then depending on this, if it's like a whole new development, it would take us, well, depending on what tire it is, but I would say like 2 to 3 years to really come out with such a tire.
I'll be honest, it's not the way I thought that would be. I had always assumed that the tire manufacturer would be dictating what tires I should be riding, whether that's width or other specs. I find interesting.
For new bikes, I would say it's definitely more dictated by the bike manufacturers. But if you're talking about replacement parts or about like any bike tire that you can buy in a bike shop, basically, then we of course have to make sure to still have products in our portfolio to also fit older bikes. So just because, I don't know, Specialized is coming out with a tire clearance of 35 mil, there are still so many bikes in the market that are only able to fit like 25 or 28 mil tires. So if we only looked at what's new, then we would probably miss a lot of the market or consumers that, well, their reality is something completely different.
Kind of, I guess, following on from that, with the testing that and development that you do in house, is Continental more of a materials science company, or like field testing, optimization kind of company? Because I remember seeing I remember seeing a video that it must have been Continental, you guys, and then it was Dan Bigham, and it was a collaboration with Ineos. They did a video when they're out at the racetrack testing different tire widths and pressures, and there were sensors all over the rider. So is a lot of that in-field testing, or is it we're trying to optimize the rubber kind of thing?
Depends again on what you're looking for. So if we're of course developing like the different parts and raw materials of a tire, so like different compounds and stuff that goes into a tire, and that will be tested separately, like strict lab testing. Like you're looking for rolling resistance, grip, weight, like aging properties and stuff like that. So that is all done in a lab. But if we're then talking about like making our products better and also looking more towards this innovation part and taking what we have, making it better, or coming out with something completely new, then of course you also need data from the real world. And that is very hard to set up in a lab or test in a lab, because even if you go into a wind tunnel, that is a very restricted environment, which is good to have comparable results and like to do tests again and like compare different results. But of course, this only partially reflects what a rider will see the real world. And here is what really helps us when we're doing a testing such as with Ineos, to like really see like what's going on in the real world. And even there, it was kind of a confined environment, like a very we did it on the Conti-Drome, so that is a racetrack that is usually used for car and truck tire testing, where we have like different surface types, but still you get a sense or a better sense from the real world than if you did it in the lab, because you have winds coming from different directions. You have a not so perfect surface, because even if you did a imperfect surface in the lab, like let's say cobbles, then it's lab cobbles. So it's not Paris-Roubaix or Flanders or Conti-Drome cobbles in that case.
Have you seen any testing on these wide? Let's say the 35 to 40 mil wide road racing tires. Do you have any data on this from any of your in-house stuff?
We haven't tested any 40 mil tires because we don't have a 40 mil road tire in our portfolio, so there's no really point for us in testing. Of course, we're observing what our competition is doing. But it's like just doing such a test as a benchmark. It's Sorry, there was a fly. um, yeah, it wouldn't give us, well, like we would get some insights, but it's not something that we could really use for development that much. What we did do is, of course, also with the Ineos tests, like test wider tire widths, so up to 35, what is currently in our road portfolio.
Do you have results from any of that? Like, what are you seeing? Is there any sort of takeaways from any of that testing you've got?
It depends. Of course, it always depends. So there is still a very good and valid reason why in track cycling we don't see any 35 wide tires ridden at 4.5 bars. So if your surface, like if you have a smooth surface, high pressure and narrow tire is still the fastest. Like that's a fact. Like you don't have any obstacles to roll over. It's a perfect surface, and you just that's pretty easy. But if you're riding outside and not on a track or not in a very nice, I don't know, smooth tarmac Contidrome setting, then of course you usually ride on not so nice roads and maybe some cobblestones, maybe in the rain, maybe a short stretch of smooth gravel or whatever. And then the next thing for an average rider that I would say to look at is what tire clearance you have, because even if all like current testing says, 35 mil would be perfect for you, but your bike only fits 30, then I would say like buying a new bike is probably not something that anyone can just simply do or even wants to do. So this would be the next factor to look at. And then it's also partially, well, what roads you're riding at. So for me here in Hanover, Germany, I would say the tarmac we have here is what I would consider smooth most of the time. So for my like classic, I don't know, morning ride route, there is just no need for me to ride a 35 mil tire. So I usually go with 30, or at the moment I'm riding 30 actually. I have some friends in England that they say the roads are so bad and they have so many potholes, there's just so much grime and dirt on the road that they prefer to go wider, like 32 or 35.
What's the widest GP 5000 in the lineup currently?
35. I
haven't seen that in Australia.
It's the all season. It's the 35 mil ASTR. I'm not running that
slot. I need the full race variant. So okay, so you don't do a 35 width in the GP, the regular GP 5000.
Not sure. I'll do a small spoiler here. Maybe we will soon.
Okay, interesting. What's how much slower is the all season tire?
How much slower is it?
I'm giving you the most general questions, and you're like, well, on what? At what speed? Where? But someone that's buying a tire kind of just wants to know if it's faster. They don't really need to have like a 50-point chart of different road surfaces.
Yeah, so something you probably also heard quite often is like not having a puncture is the fastest. So I've ridden the all season now all through winter, just because if you're riding in like minus degrees or like lower digit plus degrees and you have a puncture on the side of the road, that's pretty much the worst thing, in my opinion, that can happen. That was just like, okay, the additional weight, I don't care. Like, it's winter riding. It's cold anyway. I'm not going full gas. So safety here for riding was the main characteristic that I looked for. This would not be a tire that I would be riding here now in spring, summer, or in fall, just because the roads are so nice that the chances of actually puncturing are very low from my experience. So I then switched to an STR in 30 mil.
Does Continental have a way that you categorize smooth tarmac? Because like you're about to ask us there, like what do we run? And my answer is a 30 mil tire. But I would potentially argue my road surface is worse than probably what you're describing in Hanover.
It's not like a strict scale or anything that I could tell you, but if you're riding on tarmac and you can feel the surface beneath you, like, kind of this rattling, then I would say it's not a smooth surface.
Okay.
Like if you feel some
that.
kind of force, like coming from, or you need additional force to like move forward, then that would be a not smooth road.
Can I flip to the other side of to the other extreme of if we take Paris-Roubaix, does Continental have an opinion, tire clearance from the pro teams aside, on what tire width they should be running? If they could fit anything?
I would say currently, or not currently, like with the testing we've done and also with the feedback that we get from our teams, I would say the optimum is between 32 and 35 at the moment. Because yes, the pavé you're riding, it's horrible. It's really, I've ridden it before and I thought I know what a bad road feels like and what cobblestones are like, but Paris-Roubaix, it's just a different level.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, there are stretches of road that are horrible to ride, but there is still so much tarmac in between where you still want to go fast. Like you still want the good aerodynamics, even if you're riding in the bunch. Like you still want the lower weight of the tire if you have to sprint. And doing all of that with a 40 mil or even wider tire, it just doesn't feel as nice. So one of the things that most of our teams look like, or the feedback that we often get, is we love wider tires, but they have to be about the same weight as the more narrow ones, because the riders will just feel the additional weight, especially when they're sprinting uphill or even in the flats. Yeah, but still for Paris-Roubaix, what we see most of our teams are using 32 or 35 mil tires.
Is it just impossible to test how much slower you are because of the heavier tires on let's say a 10-minute section where you have to accelerate 50 times? Like, because I kind of get what it's like. Oh, well, the heavier tires doesn't accelerate well because it's a bit heavier, but I would imagine that's nearly impossible to actually quantify, to put up against how much you're saving from the rolling resistance.
So it is like it's possible to do this kind of testing in a restricted environment. So you can say a 35 mil tire versus a 25 mil tire is faster over a stretch of cobbles, or it's slower over smooth tarmac surface. What is just really hard to translate into real world scenarios is like in a race, you don't have just one type of road. You can have like anything from smooth tarmac to rough tarmac to cobbles to maybe a stretch where I don't know, it rains or you have some gravel on the road. And so saying what is the fastest tire throughout a race is really hard to predict, and I would say almost impossible to really put one number to, because it just is a combination of different factors. You could probably predict it if you, I don't know, analyze and of course this is something that the teams do, like they heavily analyze the routes that they're riding and the tarmac surface or the surface of the roads that they're riding, and then they're opting for what they think is the optimum based on the data that we have and that they have, to say like, we see there is, I don't know, 30% cobbles or 20% stretch with potholes.
That's what I find curious, is like someone's at the tip of the spear there. Sounds like it's probably a bike brand. Who is that? Do you have an idea?
All of our teams are doing this kind of testing, and of course, there are some teams that have a higher budget than other teams to hire people or even to pay for all of the tests that they have to or that they're doing on their own. But usually these teams have performance engineers that would be in charge of sitting in front of all these spreadsheets and coordinating all of the tests, and then like reaching out to me and saying like, Hannah, we love working with you, but you only have, I don't know, 35 mil tires. We now need a 40 as well. But then again, this is also heavily influenced by the bike that they're riding. So ultimately, I would say our job is to give or to have tires in our portfolio for the teams that fit the bikes that they're riding. Because if the bike doesn't fit a 40 mil tire, then there is no point for us in making a 40 mil tire.
I actually find it really disappointing. Not from Continental's point of view, just that system overall seems just very inefficient. It's kind of disappointing that we're kind of getting dictated to by bike brands on 5-year development cycles who are all stuck in the...
Isn't there some potential competitive advantage for someone to go, right, I'm going to make a bike that fits 40 mil tires or whatever it might be and optimize everything around it and test it, because we might get a couple of years where no one else can friggin' fit these tires and potentially get some competitive advantage over everyone else. But it just seems as though we're stuck in this loop of small iteration updates to frame sizes or tire clearances, and it sort of just is drip fed slowly as we tick along.
But still, what we see also is a lot, like I would say most bikes that are coming out nowadays, at least from what I observe, do have a tire clearance of 32 to 35.
Mm-hmm.
And still, like you said, the development cycle of a bike is long. How long? I don't know. Probably depends on the bike brand and what's connected to it. But this trend of wider tires is not something that we've seen, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago. So I would say it's pretty recent that we've started adopting such wide tires, especially in road cycling. And also the bike brands need some time to catch up to that. So of course we now see super wide tires coming out, and there might be some frustration saying like, hey, I want to ride this tire, but I cannot. But still also bike brands probably need some time to catch up to that. And like you said, find an optimum or like do their testing and see, okay, does it make sense to have a tire clearance of 40, or does it make more sense to do 35? Or are we going back to 23? Hopefully not, but you never know.
Chris, can we just leave tire width aside for a bit? I got other things to ask you. What's the future for the Conti road race tire? Can you give any like what avenues are there for improvement in let's say the GP 5000? Like I'll list a few. Maybe there's ones I'm missing: grip, rolling resistance, puncture protection, aerodynamics, weight, suppleness, ride feel. Is there where are the gains going to be made, do you think?
I think you mentioned all or most of the characteristics that I'm looking at when we're starting a new tire development. Of course, for road tires, rolling resistance and weight are the key factors or the key properties that probably most buyers look at. But still, something like puncture protection, like I said before, not having a punctures is fastest, or like something, how do I say that? Like the fastest you can be if you're just not having a puncture. Like there's just, if a tire rolls 2 watts faster, but you have a puncture after 50 meters, then there's not really a point to it. So for new developments, we're looking at all of that. But Personally, I would say that weight is something that will be very much in the focus in the future, especially with tires getting wider.
Mm-hmm.
So if now mentioning the wide, I'm not saying tire width now, but as the volume of a tire is increasing, also the weight currently is increasing. So you do need to look at, okay, like I'm making a wider tire, but for a road bike, you don't want to put a 500-gram tire on your bike, probably. So how can we reduce the weight while still keeping puncture protection and rolling resistance at a certain level that is acceptable for road cycling? That is one thing. Another very interesting trend, and also something that is partially triggered by our teams, also in the search of looking the lightest tire, are clincher tires actually. So as TPU tubes are becoming more popular, I would say, or kind of accepted in the market, we also see a lot of people actually not switching to tubeless, but to going to TPU tubes, because for them the setup is easier, more hassle-free, or they're just more like used to the standard, I don't know, process of putting a tube in your tire. Yeah, so I do think that clincher tires is also something that we might see more in the future, also in the performance segment.
In the performance segment, then at the moment, does tubeless dominate sales? Like, has it taken over?
Yes, I would say at the moment, tubeless has taken over in the performance segment. I would say it's even something that is requested by the customer, or expected by customers. If they're buying a performance road tire, it's tubeless ready. But what we also see is that there's still a lot of customers that are like, no, I'm not riding tubeless. Like, I don't need this tire. And then they're like, there are no performance tires for me in the market at the moment. Yeah. So, but performance tires, yeah, I would say at the moment are definitely tubeless.
You think that in there's still more performance to be gained in the clincher version of the tire than the tubeless?
This is again like a very interesting question, and one that I think we'll be debating quite a lot in the years to come. But because as tires are getting wider and you're using more materials, of course, running them tubeless makes a lot more sense than running a 23 mil tire tubeless, or 25. I don't even know if there are 23 mil tubeless tires. Anyway, but maybe there are 25 mil tubeless tires. But as they're getting wider and you're using more material, like running them tubeless makes more sense. But of course, they're less attractive to be used as a pure road tire because, like I said, weight is increasing. So that's where I would see kind of the clincher making a comeback. But then you don't get as much puncture protection, or not puncture protection, but puncture feeling than from a tubeless tire.
That's an interesting one. A 35 mil lightweight race ready clincher with a TPU tube. Chris Miller, would you run it?
No, thanks. No, I'm not. No, I mean, Hannah, I should mention you're talking to two people who basically on record are saying they're never putting a tube in their tire ever again. So
if they're 150 grams lighter per tire, I'd think about it.
See, and that like that's what I'm talking about. Like a TPU tube at the moment is like what, 30 grams. So that's pretty much what you put in for sealant. But if you don't need the tire to be airtight, you can leave out a lot of the material, which puts you in a place where, not saying that it's 150 grams, but you can shed some weight, which is always relevant in road cycling.
I'm curious as to how businesses run and what's happening behind the scenes. So your product engineers, are they more on the if the pro teams and maybe some collaborations you do with them as kind of handling the field testing of it, does that mean when Continental are designing the GP6000, let's say, more of the team are working on the actual material and it's not so much the field testing or the lab testing? Like, is that where Continental has the competitive edge? Is the actual...
So that is one part of a new development, is like looking at the materials that you're using. So yeah, coming out with, and it's not just compound, it's also like construction. It's like how you do the different layers and like what materials you're using. It's also about the production process, like the curing time, the heat that you're curing a tire with, and all of that. So there are just so many factors that go into making a tire way before you could even start field testing. So you can only field test something that we have first in-house done a release test with to be sure that it's safe to use on the outside. And then we can start field testing. And then that's, of course, also valuable feedback, because if we're making a new tire that we give, and again, like testing with pro teams is just so convenient and also good for us, because these are people whose job it is to ride their bike all day, pretty much. So you, like, even if I gave the two of you a tire, you would probably not spend as much time on your bike as any pro rider does. So if you give them like 2 or 3 different tires, they can easily, or pretty easily, tell you like, this feels kind of weird, this feels good. And of course, this is not backed by any numbers, but this gives us good hints at what to look at and what to analyze deeper, or if we're just going into a completely wrong direction at a certain point. Yeah, so there's also, coming back to your question, so there's a lot of testing happening on the material side, but there's also a lot of testing happening on the field.
Across all the top end road performance tires, across all the brands, how similar are they? Like, is it essentially just rubber molded, and you're kind of all making? Well, I mean, but you know, are we really operating in the weeds when it comes to a difference between a Continental GP5000 and a Vittoria Corsa, or are there like, is it just a totally different makeup?
They are completely different. Of course, they're all road tires, but they are different. So like I said, we're both of the companies. So we're doing our own material development. They're doing their own material development. They're using different materials for the plies. We're using different materials. They're having different curing times than we do. And we see all of these factors like in the production and also in the raw material side to impact then the final product. And of course, the product is a slick road tire, and you like look at it and you're like, they kind of look similar. But even if you're riding different tires, you can...
I'm not going to argue that. Sadly, Hannah, I am one of those people. I can tell you like that, the difference between tires. So that's why I wanted to know, like, are we talking about very subtle changes? But obviously you're saying no, there is differences everywhere when it comes to these products. Yeah, look, as we've seen the tires get wider, we're seeing the wheels get wider. And we have this chat on the show very, very often, Hannah. In fact, Jesse even came up with the Jesse coil. Was it the percentage or the ratio?
It's a ratio.
Which was in relation to the internal rim width of a wheel, the external rim width of a wheel, and how that then affected the tire that you put on it. Well, I think ultimately it was that dictated the tire that you put on it, I think. And personally, I've kind of settled in at the moment around this 24 mil rim internal for a 30 mil tire as being the optimum setup for myself. like, does Continental have an opinion in 2025 what the ideal internal rim width for a tire is?
No. Not to disappoint you. But the ideal tire width from our perspective, I would say, is the one that is within the ETRTO standard. So if you're, I know this is now very boring, but so you cannot ride a tire that is below a certain width or above a certain width if you're running, like you said, a 24 internal
Yep.
mil
Yep.
rim. The way we develop our tires is also based on the ETRTO. So we use a certain design rim for a tire that is then optimized on that rim. And if you're going wider, use wider rim. And if you're going smaller, use smaller rim.
Is it the same rim that you test on for all the different tire sizes?
No. So this, for different tire sizes, you have different rim widths.
Yep.
So this changes.
Yep. Okay.
But this is then the rim used for testing, yes.
Right.
For testing, for release testing. But this doesn't, like, if our team is running, I don't know, a 23 mil internal rim and we developed on a 22, then that's of course also fine. As you might know, like with changing rim widths, like if you're on the upper or lower edge of the width, the tire shape changes
massively,
drastically or massively. I would say, like, if you're in a certain range, there is no, of course you get or lose some, or if you, sorry, missing some words. If you're within a range, I would say you're fine. Like the tire shape changes, it gets wider or more narrow, but there's nothing from a safety perspective that should concern you as a rider. But if you're on the outer edges, the tire can either shape like a, like a bulb, like a pear, or it can get like super flat, where we're then talking about getting like pinch flats, or the chances of a pinch flat actually getting higher, and also the ride feel of the tire just gets very, very weird. So from our perspective, being within this range is super, super important for any rider, but there's no optimum internal rim width where we would say that's the best.
Is UAE Team Emirates sponsored by Continental, or they just buy your tires?
No, they're sponsored by us.
Okay. Is there any feedback from them then? Because you've got on a few extremes, you've got Ineos, who I'm pretty sure are still using Shimano Dura Ace wheels. That's a 21 internal. And then you've got one of the forefront in the wider tires, which is UAE, who are on Envy, which is like 24.5 internal, at least on the front, running what seems like 30, maybe 32 tires. Do you have any information on feedback that's coming from them, given that they're seem to be at the forefront of it? Sorry, we've gone back to widths again. We just can't help it.
we love tire widths. Yeah. So again, the standard ETRTO I mentioned before. So as UAE is running 25 mil internal width rims, they cannot run anything below 29 mil tire width. So that is like regulated by the UCI and also by the ETRTO. And of course, we're also heavily asking them to not run anything more narrow, which of course they don't. But so they're running 30 mil tires at the moment. Like you said, for Ineos, because they're running more narrow rims, they can, or we still see them using 28 mil tires in races.
Because so the Envies are hookless, and we've seen quite a few crashes, not from any of the Envy teams, from riders, and it seems like it's a common thing where they hit a pothole, and some kind of damage happens to the rim, and then at some short period of time after they hit that pothole or have a crash, the tire blows off the rim. Does Continental have an opinion on that? Is that an issue that the rim manufacturers need to look at, or is that just an inherent risk of using a hookless tire, that there's just less grip to hold the bead on?
I would say it's not necessarily connected to hookless. So something that we also see in the races is that if a rider has a flat, of course they're in the racing, trying to get to the best position, so they will usually just continue riding. And if they then hit a pothole or have to, like if there's an obstacle in front of them and they have to make like a sudden movement, then this can lead the tire to just slide off the rim because it's already flattened and like they kept riding. So as soon as you have a flat, for any riders out there, please stop. It doesn't matter if you're riding hooked or hookless. It's just, yeah, at that point, if you have a flat, stop. Also, you're probably buying your rims yourself. So also for the well-being of your rim, that's probably the better thing to do. Yeah, what with hookless, I would say what we see more is this, or what we've seen more, I think by now everybody's well aware of the topic, but is overinflation. Because people are coming from riding, I don't know, 23 mil tires at 8 bar and 19 mil internal rim width to running 25 mil hookless at, I don't know, 4 bar or 3.5 or whatever. And some are like, no, that's like way too less pressure, and they just pump their tire to the max, and then it blows off, and then they're like, whoa, I don't know, the tire is like, I don't know, there's something with the bead or there's something with the rim. But yeah, it's a lot of misuse also that we've seen in the past years. So always follow the max pressure stated on the rim as well as on the tire, and follow the lower one. That's super important.
Mm-hmm. My opinion on the hookless thing is I just don't see the benefit. To me, it just seems like, can we just have the hooks on, and it seems like the tire and the wheel performs the same. Am I missing something there? Does Conti have data on perhaps why a hookless rim might perform better with the tire, or is it?
No, or at least I'm not aware of any data that we would have on hookless rims being better. Still, there, like, if you're following the instructions, so like using the right width, using the right pressure, they're safe to use. So there's nothing that you should really be concerned of, but just the potential of misuse is just higher with the hookless rim than with the hooked rim, especially for people that maybe are just not aware of the topic.
Okay.
And again, in recent years, the topic has been very present in the media. So I think by now, most people riding hookless rims are aware that they're riding hookless rims, and they're aware that they should follow the the tire width and the pressure recommendations. But performance-wise, there's no benefit for riding hookless rims.
Do you use a tire pressure calculator? One of the online
Of course
ones?
I do.
What's
all of them?
What's the pick of the bunch? What's the top 10? What's the top 5? Whose data should we be using?
Top 10, top 5. I do like using the SRAM one.
Okay.
I do like using the Silca one, but I find it sometimes a bit too high. And one that I've been testing, or not really testing, but using as well in the past few weeks, was the one from Wolftooth. What I find very interesting about that one is that they've included temperature, so inflation temperature as well as riding temperature, and then adjusted the tire pressure values according to that. So I find that, just also interesting, especially when you're riding in winter and you're inflating your tire at home. and then to just see, or for me also think about like how the pressure changes if you're then riding outside in minus whatever degrees. But yeah, overall, I do like the SRAM one, and I find it to be very accurate.
Do you suspect other brands copy Continental? Because the GP5000s, like the GP4000 was ahead, and then everyone tries to catch up. Then the GP5000's released, and then everyone's tried to catch up. And I feel like in the last year, Pirelli just released a new tire, Hutchinson are going to release a new tire, and they're all kind of trying to catch up. Do you suspect other brands buy the Contis and lab test them and just try and copy it?
Well, just try and copy that, I think would be hard, because like I said, we do a lot of material development, and I do think just like by analyzing what's in the tire and then just like copy paste, we're going to make the same. It's hard because it's not just material, but also like the whole production process and like the construction of the tire and everything to it. So I do think that that's hard, but like you said, also we see a lot of brands coming out with very good products, which of course is on the one hand side like not so good for us, but on the other side, having competition is also good. I think like it makes innovation a bit easier, or I think it triggers innovation more than being, if you're just like the benchmark for tires out there and your competition is like doing whatever else product. I think it's way harder to really come out with innovative new products than if you see other brands coming out with something where you're like, oh wow, okay, this tire is now lighter, or it has less rolling resistance, or it uses new materials. So I do think that having competition also helps us in being better.
Mm-hmm. And what about pricing of the tires then? Because it has been creeping up. Now, anytime I talk about pricing, I think the improvement in tire tech has been, since I started cycling, has been amazing, like absolutely worth every dollar. So I'd never complain about the price of a bike tire. But is that factored into the development? Are there some? Have you came up with maybe some prototypes and just gone, the material's too expensive, it's just not going to work?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we also look at when we're developing a new tire. So we have our performance tire line, that will be the GP5000, where all of our premium materials, like the latest stuff we have, just goes in there, because that's like our premium performance tires. But we have a tire line below that. We recently launched a new tire in this, we call it endurance segment, called the Grand Prix, in a tubeless ready as well as a tube type version. And there we still use some of the components that we'd use in a 5000 family, but still kind of down spec it to meet this lower price point. So the tire is a bit heavier, it rolls not as fast, maybe it doesn't have as much puncture protection, or maybe it has more puncture protection, because we see that, especially in the endurance segment, that's very important. But then it's again a trade-off with weight. So price is definitely something that we also have in mind when we're developing a tire, because we also want to sell the tires that we're making.
If you were making a tire that was not for necessarily for sale, and like money was no object, like you weren't trying to make this rational for sale, how much better could you make a tire, a road race tire? Like, would it be like half the weight? And
so what property would you say, like, your ideal road tire?
You've got to keep all the same puncture protection that's currently in your GP5000. All right. I'm a little bit lighter. The weight thing doesn't bother me too much, but I want this thing to roll for days. I want the greatest rolling resistance that's ever occurred. Like, what could we make here? Like, are we being held back by just the economy of having to sell these things?
No,
okay,
definitely not. So, what always is an option is just reducing puncture protection, but then you're.
I don't want that.
It's
Yeah.
just me either. So it's like I don't want to annoy customers. Like I still want to give them a product that they can just rely on, that they can be super fast on. Like rolling resistance, of course, is always key. But still, you don't want to stand by the side of the road after 500 meters and like put in your second, oh, you're riding tubeless, sorry, but like cleaning your bike for the 5th time because it's full of sealant.
But we're talking hypothetical here. Like, is there some magic compound that can get that we can have it all, but it's just gonna cost $500 a tire?
I would
not really
say no at the moment, because puncture protection, like with the issue here is like you want something that is proof or that is it proof? No, that. Well, it doesn't puncture, so you want like a stiff material or something hard, but you still need it flexible to make a tire out of it. You still need it to be light, so you don't add rolling resistance and or weight to a tire. So that's kind of the hard part, and that's also the part where we're currently doing quite a good job with the Vectron breaker that we're using, that it is very puncture proof, but also very light. So yeah, that's also something that maybe is interesting for a GP6000. But yeah, it's nothing where you could then say, oh, this is now a, I don't know, tire that I can ride over glass and not worry about a puncture. But currently, I would say that that's unrealistic. But if you're not worrying about puncture protection, then rolling resistance-wise, I think there is a lot possible.
Okay. All right.
Or fun tires that we can make, but
we'll send you an email after.
Not meant for sale.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us, Hannah, and helping us out with some of this stuff. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we will obviously stay in contact. And the GP6000's on its way. We're more than willing to test ride for you. But no, thank you so much.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.